This is Life Lessons Lounge, and I'm Igina Gerazi. Here, we explore diverse life stories and the wisdom they hold. Let's delve into the stories that shape us, teach us, and connect us all. Welcome. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to talk to Sebastian, a remarkable storyteller who takes us on an incredible journey through his life, from the corporate world to personal transformation, from being a traveler of the world to an explorer of the self. Sebastian shares his path of navigating change, facing life's storms, and ultimately learning to surrender, trust, and find clarity. Through his adventures, including a near death experience at sea, he uncovers the power of embracing fear and uncertainty while staying open to the lessons life presents. Tune in to discover Sebastian's journey of self discovery and resilience, and discover what it means to truly trust in the process of life. Enjoy. Welcome, Sebastian. I'm glad you're here.
Regina, it's an honor and one of the biggest joys to be in your podcast and see you. Have the chance to see you for another hour.
Thank you. Thank you. So I wanted us to just know a little bit about Sebastian. Who's Sebastian? Even though it's a big question.
Is it a big question? Is it a small question? So who are we? Sebastian is basically it's the name my parents have given this little creature that dropped out almost 48 years ago. My birthday is in October, so I'm 47 now. I'm born and raised in Germany, middle of Germany, then left my hometown for studies, traveled the world, studied at different places already, which was a continuation. My mother's from Poland, so there was a lot of travel in my life. Having studied management because I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, and I was at that time still in the path of asking people, and I said, like, where do you make the most money? So that's what you're supposed to study. I didn't resonate with that, but I didn't have an alternative, so I went doing this, studied in Germany and in London, and having finalized my studies, I was off to the world. In fact, I started in Germany for a small airline that went bankrupt. Then I continued working for a big airline, which was Lufthansa, and that gave me a lot of chances to travel. I started in a company, a sub-company at Lufthansa Consulting, which gave me the chance to live 3 years in Cairo, 2 years in Saudi Arabia. I traveled to Mexico for projects and India, so the world was my playground during that time.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
seems like it. It's a lot
a
of
lot of
traveling.
traveling. And it's interesting because traveling you can see from different sides. Traveling can be the process of traveling, from process of being on a journey. But it can also be that staying open and moving around the place you are. We are on this planet, so traveling means roaming, moving, being at places. So I was not always traveling, I was also in the places. When I was in Cairo, I was in Cairo for 3 years. I woke up with the people. We used the same taxis. I spent time with them. So that was very important for me and still is to become part of the surroundings. So that moved on. I met my then wife, still traveling a lot, and we had our first child. Interesting enough, she is a pilot, so we were both acquainted to moving and visiting places and being on places. Had 1, 2, 3 kids. During that time, I made a decision to, yeah, interesting because I seemingly made a decision not to travel that much, which is impossible because if you're not traveling physically, you're still traveling mentally. And that changed a lot because I wanted to be a lot more with my kids. Even for me in Germany, you have the chance to step out of your work and return to your workplace after up to 3 years. So I spent 1 year for each kid at home so that my wife could travel at that time. So I have a very close relationship to my kids, but I always traveled and missed the travel when I was not doing. I was based in Lufthansa in Frankfurt, had a very fixed job, then moved to a job where cultural development was important. So in the beginning, I was working a lot with project, and I moved into cultural development. Lufthansa intended to change its culture. It was a big thing, leading a project there, more and more turning into a facilitator, which I didn't know at that time. But I found myself at places where I was opening spaces for others to find themselves and create something together. It's always bringing people together. In that language, I knew at that time I was a moderator. So I moderated workshops. I created, designed, moderated workshops. And there was a very decisive workshop in 2015, which brought me from the path of being a corporate guy to someone who is bringing people together. Still corporate at that time, but I could already feel, although I didn't admit it to myself at that time, that something dramatically is changing inside. Made it through Lufthansa. So in my last job, I was the lead facilitator for our head of people, so our chief people officer in the headquarter, moderated, designed workshops, the concept for the whole transformation. Before I was, no, I was sounds so passive. I was not pushed, but somehow I seemed to jump from the cliff into the unknown. In the form of partner at that time, I already separated from my wife. We're still good friends, but at that time I was not married anymore. But I had a partner, and she left me from one day to the other. So that opened the whole black hole you're so afraid to fall in, and I fell in and went on a deep transformational journey, which is now almost 4 years ago. That completely changed my life. So traveling is in my veins, changes in my veins, maybe just
But also bringing people together seems to be in your
this is in
vein
my
as well.
veins. And you know, these all little things that seemingly are in my veins or in my cells, or it's part of me being here, that have been suppressed in one way or the other for the sake of what I thought was family, for the sake of what I thought was job, for the sake of what people, and I don't want to blame people or society, but what I thought the outside expected from me. And this crisis really, that shook up everything. I went through everything. I was in an ashram for a couple of days. I tried to find my salvation in yoga. I was very close to that spiritual escape where I say, like, yes, they have all the answers, just to figure out for myself. And probably this is the sentence which follows me through. It's not finding the right answer. So I was looking for answers, answers, answers. And after all, it was about finding the right question. And is there a right question? There's
Interesting.
not, but there's always a question behind the question, and that keeps you going. So, and here I am now 2 years, 3 years ago, I left my corporate job. I'm self-employed. My kids are still around, having lots of fun, developing themselves, growing up to wonderful people, and me just on the lookout and seeing the horizon and feeling that the next step is due. That's me. Part of it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a very, really colorful life as well. As you said, with a lot of searching, a lot of transformation, a lot of connecting as well. It feels connecting the dots as well. And you mentioned a lot of big stuff happening. Like, even though you just mentioned things for a second, is there something that you would more want to stop more into? Like, what have been some of the most turning points in your life? If you could pick one
Hmm.
or two of them.
I mean, birth definitely was one, but I cannot remember too much of it. There are 2 points in my life which have dramatically shifted the path. Like they moved the needle of my world. That was one was during my corporate time when I came back from. I mentioned that I was a consultant and I was traveling a lot in the world. We were like really hands-on working, and then there was a shift in my, let's say, career, professional career, with deep implications for the rest of my life. And then there's another one that really then shifted everything. That big black hole I was talking about, which is definitely not black if you look at it, but it was black at that time, which shifted the already transformed Sebastian into stepping into my myself that I'm today. So if you want, we can
Mm-hmm.
tackle both. Let,
Yeah,
let's
let's take
let's
one.
take the career one, which was around 2014, 15. I was corporate. I was corporate in terms of, yes, I was traveling a long time. Then as I mentioned, I stepped back from the travel for the sake of what everybody expected me to be there for my family, which I also wanted to at this time because I didn't see a chance to kind of, how can I be with my family when, especially, I didn't mention, or did I mention before, my wife is a pilot. She's a captain.
Yeah.
She was traveling a lot. And so if you want to take care for the kids the way we thought we needed to take care of them, I needed to step back, and which was fine. It didn't feel like me stepping back, but what it felt, I turned from traveling almost every week to being at the corporate headquarters next to a runway of one of the biggest airports in Germany, which was nice because I could see the planes, but I didn't expect that seeing the planes triggers so much longing for being on these planes. So anyway, we went into project management. It was a good job. We had some responsibility. We were organizing and kind of managing things for projects. We created a portfolio for those who are knowledgeable about business, and there are a lot of projects. And when a company does a lot of projects and they don't streamline it, it's a mess. So you put a portfolio view on it, and as you can hear, that my energy is already getting a little bit low because this is a lot of managing work. And that's good. A lot to do with people, a lot to do with my experience at that time. I was a project manager, know what they needed. We had a good team and everything. And one day we thought, obviously, that's the idea of our department. We were four people and said, like, there's so many people working in projects which do not somehow fit in the traditional hierarchy of a company. So I'm not getting into too much detail. It was just about giving them a community. We said, let's create a project community for all people who are involved in project at Lufthansa Cargo at that time. It was fantastic. We said like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's have a 2-day event. We planned a conference, the classical conference. So what do we mean by classical? We were four people planning the conference. So we stepped into the role of the experts and tried to anticipate what all the people on this conference would need from us. So what turned out was an amazing conference. 180 to 200 people, don't remember exactly. They had a plan, so we organized all the things we thought they like and they need to know. So they just had their plans. They went to the conference, and the day after the conference, we talked to many of them. We got a very good feedback. And after a week, we had another feedback round, and we realized that most of the people, they didn't even remember the conference. They said like, oh yes, there was this conference, but what was it about? And by asking deeper, we figured out it was not so relevant for them. It was nice, it was a good time, and of course they got some knowledge, but there was too much daily trouble. So with this information, we thought like next year we're going to do something else. We didn't know what, but we need to do something where people really want to come and where people feel that what they get is needed. And on the lookout, on the search, still searching at the time, we found a very interesting consultancy, a group of facilitators that told us to do different, that taught us to do different. So almost more than half a year
Mm.
before they started working with us, we started figuring out the needs of the groups. For everyone who's interested in facilitation, give me a call, or they can call you and we give them the details. For the large audience, it's like it was a dramatic shift in my mindset. So I thought we have to do it like we did before. And they showed me that it can be done differently. And it was quite adventurous because I've never done like this. And for me, being in a corporate, I always thought like I have to do everything perfect. And what they asked from us, basically not being perfect, but just trusting our instincts and bringing the things together as they flow. There was a shift. We planned for it. We were three moderators, supposed to be three moderators, again, 180, 200 people, a 3-day conference. And a 3-day conference in a corporate context for 180 people is something. So they needed proof that there's value in it. And the only thing we said, there's going to be value for it because we co-developed it with you, but we couldn't give them the results because you don't know what's coming out of a conference. Many people blamed us. Many people said they're not going to come if you don't give them clear results. So for me, it was quite of shaky. It gave me a bad feeling. However, we were 3 moderators. We had the support of our boss, so we wanted to go 2 days before the conference. My 2 co-moderators quit. Now, they didn't quit. One became pregnant, and she really had all this bad feelings in the first 3 months. If you're unlucky, she basically couldn't moderate. The other one got sick. So it turned out it was me alone. Side note, it was in the middle of my separation from my wife, having 3 kids, one of them below 1, the other one 3 and 5. It was really now suddenly all the perceived pressure was on me. So the half of the company blaming us for having a bad conference and wasting the time, the other half coming and saying, "Oh, we're going to see." Then at home, my then wife about to take off and said, "You can go to the conference, but you have to take care of the kids." So I was alone. And I remember I called the guys from this facilitation group and asked them, "Can please one of you just come and sit in the space with me to go through that perceived hell?" It was a 3-day conference. I managed everything. I took my little son, the other one to kindergarten. I came to the conference. I moderated. I facilitated. I was in the flow for 3 days. And it was such a flow. I was literally with my back on the wall. 180 people expecting, kids expecting, then in separation, wife expect. It was actually painful. I didn't know. I was crying at night because I didn't know if I could manage all this. I was afraid of losing out in every field. And the 3 days went like a dream. It was like, when you're really in your flow, when you're really in your mission, in your purpose, and even though you don't know it is your purpose, you just don't know. There's no time. There's no time. There's no space. You just flow and you do what is to be done. You just don't ask. And I remember the last. Yes,
Sebastian, sorry. How was this a turning point for you in your life? Like, what did it teach you?
it was a turning point in terms of letting go. In terms of trusting that what I have prepared, what we have prepared, is good, and just surrender it to the flow. We prepared that container, the 3-day container. There were clear paths, there was a clear methodology, assigned roles, except the 2 moderator roles, which then fell into myself. And it was surrender and trust what you have already accomplished. Also surrender and trust no matter what the outside tells you. There will be always somebody feeling that this could be different, this is wrong, this is right, and just realize that you're enough. Surrender to yourself. You are enough at that moment. And also feel, and it turned out to be a huge success. They're still talking about it today. And this is years ago. Turns out that this was also a hint to my new way of dealing with things. And really, it was in me. Looking back from that point, I always worked like this. I just thought I have to control it. I thought I have to present it. And that was the moment to let go.
So 180 people, and you seem to have succeeded in letting go and surrendering, right? I think just for me to, and for everyone to understand, because it is a huge responsibility as well, having 180 people at 2-3 days conference. So how did you reach that point? What did you need to let go of to reach to that point of surrendering? Because surrender is a huge word, right? Especially what I can sense, it was someone who didn't know much of that concept before this, right? How was that?
I want to, as a note before, I want to say that in my life before, and especially since then, and the other things I experienced, surrendering and letting go can happen from so many things, and it's different for every person. For me, still today, letting go and surrendering is something I have to actively do. And it's not the one thing where I can say, this was it. And this is it for everyone. For me, it is trusting myself. At that time, there was a huge issue. trusting me, loving myself, appreciating myself. And that's for me being under severe pressure. At that moment, there was extreme pressure. So the co-moderators, they canceled 2 days in advance. So that increased the pressure even more. There was pressure before, but I always had two people, and I thought I knew that we're going to be three people. So the responsibility is going to be split over three people. The letting go was the moment when I said, like, it feels right. It felt right within. It was absolutely, I had to do it. It was like a calling. At that time, I couldn't name it, but it was like a calling. It was like something my soul craving for and saying, this is it. You need to go. Just say, like, even afterwards, I had this kind of smaller conference, bigger conferences. I still had the feeling of the moment when you get your mic on your ear, yeah, and when they basically put the cables on you. When I was in a corporate, there was this little part of me coming to me and saying, "You know what, Sebastian? You just you just go. You tell the people you're sick. You call in sick. In Germany, it's like when you call in sick, that's fine. You can go home." And there's still this little man or woman or thingy in my head that comes up and says, just go,
I just
and then yeah, let it
let it go
go,
a
and
little bit.
no, go in terms of drop the mic and go. Really drop the mic and go.
Yeah,
But then
exactly.
on
They're
the other
dropping it
hand,
off. Yeah,
there's the self, the calm and quiet inside. There's something inside you which is, the ego or the little parts. They always like very active. Let it go, just run or do it, or you have to do it. But the self is always clear and calm and says, like, hey, trust yourself, or go right, or step in. That was
you
the
got
thing.
this.
That was the thing. There was an internal and then pressure. I had no choice than just to perform, just to be myself. There were too many people, too many expectations to not be myself. 180 people. If you're dealing with your partner, you can always try to match what your partner wants. But dealing with 180 people, no chance. You just need to be yourself in order to survive. And I did.
Well done. Well done. Good. So great with the surrendering and the trusting and everything. And I love to see the process, how you got there. So, what advice would you have for people when they're at this turning point of letting go and trusting?
Two things. And I have to say, it took me another 4 5 years and another major life crisis to figure that out. So it's easier said than done, and I'm sometimes struggling with it. But it's listen to what you hear from inside. So there are a lot of people outside who want to give you advice and who want to tell you what is right, and especially the people that obviously know you well as the people you want to trust and you want to give the responsibility to. But after all, it's you inside yourself. You know what it is, and you have fears, and you have parts in you that are holding you back. So the first thing for me is to see the fear, to see what is holding me back. That's a process. That's not easy. However, become the observer. Like stepping on that stage, there was this fear, what I mentioned, this fear that I like dropped the mic. And seeing this, really seeing it in the forms of it could be a little person, or could be a little thing, could be a little animal, it could be a figure, a triangle, whatever. But when you really calm down, take a deep breath, and you see that fear, and that fear wants to tell you something. It wants to tell you like you have failed before, and then realize that, embrace that fear, take it, say yes, thank you for showing me. Fear is nothing bad. Don't try, do whatever you want to try. But for me, it's like, I'm not trying to push them away and say, I don't need it right now. Push it away. Because that pushing only leads to bigger emotions. These emotions they are just dark tunnels that just want to show you something. So don't push yourself away. Don't hate yourself for something. And if you don't make it at that time, if you are in a transformation and you cannot make the step you really wanted to do, so given in that situation, it could have stepped out and said, I'm sick as well. No, the world would have continued to exist. then that's fine. Don't blame yourself for having these feelings. And then also use that little seed of adventurers in you. We are all here to create on that planet. If you really look into ourselves, when we were children, we always, we climbed the high walls, even though our parents said don't do. So there is this little adventurous guy or girl that wants to explore. So, and give it a chance. Explore it. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing can happen to you. Except you shouldn't jump from a bridge where there are only stones. And there's like, trust your mind. But sometimes you give it a little step. Just make that next little step.
Yeah. What I hear, Sebastian, is also a lot of self-compassion there as well, and
And that I
self-acceptance.
can also, for those, if I would listen to myself 4 years ago, I would say, yes, I am. Yes, I do. And then I would be in a crisis and I would say like, yeah, self-compassion and love. It took me a long time. And really, really, I remember the first time after a major life crisis, somebody told me, go back to your heart, listen to your heart. And I was standing there like, what do I listen? So what does it mean, listen to your heart? We say it so easily. Like when somebody comes in crisis, listen to your heart, listen to your heart. At that moment, you're in a crisis. You probably cannot listen to your heart. And it took me tough and strong training. That conference was the first part. 4 years later, there was a breakup in my life that tore me completely apart. And that showed me like, no, you didn't listen to your heart. And then you figure out, oh, you didn't listen to your heart, and you blame yourself. And then you're trapped because you want to love yourself, but you blame yourself for not loving yourself. So you're going rounds and rounds and rounds. So take it easy. It's okay. Now, loving yourself is nothing often we are not taught to love ourselves. Often we are taught to be tough.
So that's what I'm curious. Yeah. So what does that mean to you now to love yourself? Because it feels like you've gone into deeper levels of that lesson to be learned.
It means, first of all, to be grateful to be here. Also, this might sound pathetic to somebody. It's like, we're breathing. We can see the beautiful sunrise or sunset in the evening. Just that is a beautiful thing. And the world might crumble and everything, but I'm still here. Just see that little details. Love myself. So when something goes wrong today, of course, there are these feelings telling me, oh, how could you? And for me today, it means like I see these feelings. They're like, I don't know. When my 3 children, sometimes they just kick a glass from the table. Bam! Again, a broken glass. Or the cow on a table. Like the first feeling is like, oh, how could you do that? So what do you do with the child? Do you blame it? Do you treat it bad, or do you say like, oh, how could you do that? Remember my children? They looked at me and said, no, actually, it's even worse. I used to say, how can you do it? Or it's not possible to do it. Yeah, you don't do it. And how is this possible? You just dropped the glass. And they looked at me like, I don't know, but it happened. So it's possible. So it's possible. So what do you do when your child just puts his hand on a hot stove? It burns his hand. You take it, you embrace it, and you just figure out, how are you? Can I help you? And what do you do yourself? Just observe yourself. What do you do when you touch a hot stove? I, at that time, blamed myself for, oh, you idiot, you did it again. You bad person. I mean, you're 45. You should have known that you don't touch the hot stove. But no, just it's your child. Treat yourself like a child. Just look at you and say like, oh man, am I okay? Get help. Hug yourself. Pathetically, yes, hug yourself. Just take yourself. You feel lost in this whole crisis in the world. You read the news, you see the news, you're told that the world is going down, climate crisis, wars, and everything. What do you do with a child if he comes to you and is overwhelmed and it's just crying? You take it and you say, like, I got you. Get yourself. Got yourself. You are grown up. You can take yourself. And if you're not able to do that, just go to your neighbor and get that hug. Go to your friend. Call a friend. Tell them to tell you that everything is going to be all right. Yeah. To go back into your
Beautiful.
power, and of course, we need to change the world. Of course, you shouldn't touch the stuff. And then comes the next thing, that's learning. Learn from it. Every child learns from it. They touch the stuff once. I never do this. And probably they do that under circumstances that are different now. So accept that. Love yourself, hug yourself, and then move on. Smile, be grateful. After all, touching the stuff, feeling it on your hand also shows you that you're alive, right? If you wouldn't be alive, then you wouldn't feel it. So amazing. Thank you for, yes, for that burns.
It's amazing what comes up when I hear you. It's amazing how much children are like our teachers. We learn so much from them. So it's like going back to remembering how we were and before all the conditioning and
Yes.
everything.
And that's probably another thing I would mention here. We have everything in us. And it's probably not only that we need to learn from children, so we and the outside children, but we have this child in us. We have been children. We have been at this stage. We have burned ourselves and we know how to forgive. We know how to let go. Just watch children, how fast they let go. And they come with a broken knee or with a wound on their knee and they cry like it's the end of the world. And just 10 seconds later, they're still bleeding. They just find something else. They let go.
True, true. So what other lessons have you learned? Because you mentioned some major life crisis without even want, if you don't want to go into it, but just what lessons have you learned?
The lessons I've learned is that you're never alone. There are people around you that are ready to hold you in the darkest hours. When you probably all come to the point where we lose everything, where we feel like we're losing everything. We lose a partner, and at the same time, then we lose our friends. We lose suddenly our parents don't talk to us anymore. If they talk, we don't want to talk to them. And then you feel completely alone. And that's where you think it's so dark that you cannot see the hand, and there's always light around. And it's there. Trust it. I was on a sailing trip, and there was part of this crisis, and I'm not a sailor. We took a trip 1,000 kilometers over the Mediterranean Sea. So a friend of mine called me like, "Hey, let's have a sailing trip."
That's courageous. That's really courageous, not being a
And it's a good
sailor.
friend. I trust him, and I really love him in a way like friendship. You love him, and then you don't see each other, and then you love him again. And he is a sailor for 40 years, and I always wanted to go sailing with him. And that was the moment, a year after a major crisis, where he called me up and said, "Hey, Sebastian, you want to join on a sailing trip?" I said, like, of course. And my mind told me the story of sailing trip in Mallorca. I was in Mallorca, Mediterranean island. So like, okay, we go from bay to bay and we sail and it's going to be beautiful. And I asked him just occasionally, like, where are we going? How long is it? And he said, like, it's 4 or 5 days. And we're going to transfer a ship from Mallorca to Sardinia, another Mediterranean island. And I said, oh, fine, it's cool. So how many people are we going to be? 4 people? Oh, 5 people, wonderful. Bunch of friends. Can I take a friend of mine? And then he said something that made me think. He said, like, no, you're the only one who cannot sail. And for this trip, I need experienced sailors. And I became kind of, like interested and hang up the phone. A couple of days later, I called him. So can you tell me a little bit more about the trip? So why 4 people, 5 people, and how far is it? And then he came with all the details, like it's 1,000 kilometers. Guess a boat goes 12 kilometers per hour. So 1,000 kilometers is quite a trip. Then he told me that we're going days and night shifts. So we're sailing full time, 24 hours. Okay. And then I began to doubt crept in and ask him what could be the worst case. He said, actually, it's good. It's at the edge of something they call, I mentioned before, it's the wind. There's a very strong wind blowing over the Mediterranean Sea at a certain time. It's a wind that builds up all over Europe and then it crashes at the sea. The Mistral. You can Google Mistral. So whenever you have the chance, Google Mistral and it will tell you their waves. And whenever you know there's a Mistral, never go out. He told me it's at the edge, the Cor de Lion, but I was like, man, elephants die from bug bites and I'm going into the storm. So talking, night shifts and everything, and I was really inside. I was tense. I remember I decided to go. And I remember that the night before I went, I wrote an email to my parents thanking them for an amazing life, and I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't expect
Wow.
death. I just knew that something inside me will change. And then I stepped on the boat. It was like when I was a child, we played astronauts with my sister, and we always did it at night. It was so scary and new adventures. And we were taking off at night. It was really in the dusk. We stepped on the boat, and then the sun was setting, and we were setting off. Uh, and I met my then partner, and she was standing there, and we were waving goodbye. It felt like, a salesman waving goodbye for the rest of his life in order to discover the world. So the first 3 nights, it was amazing. We left the land. It's a strange feeling when you've never been on this kind of trips, and then you see the land becoming smaller and smaller, and suddenly it's gone. And after some days, you're in the middle of the ocean, and you just see horizon. There's just see wherever you look, there's water, and then there's basically 2 kilometers of waters below you, hundreds of kilometers in front and around you, and 2 million infinite kilometers of sky. That's where we stopped. We jumped into the water. I can tell you, jumping from a boat there in the middle of nowhere is something. And during the last day, we already had high waves. We actually had the plain sea the whole time. It was like traveling on a lake. And I was always in the night shift because I liked it. We started at 2 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock. And every morning, the sun, first you saw a little light. It became lighter and lighter. And suddenly there was the sun, just like this. No one asking for it. No one controlling it. It was just there. And in the last night, I was in this night shift standing there, and the shift before, the guy, he didn't want to sleep. He was a sailor, didn't want to sleep. And I was taking over. And then there were some flashes and obviously some thunderstorms far behind us. And I looked at it, and as a non-sailor, I asked my sailor. He was the hobby sailing man, so he was not so knowledgeable. We looked at it, and he said, like, it's not important. Just don't care. 10 minutes later, our skipper, so the very experienced one, woke up because he woke up. Like he obviously had it in his blood. He came up, eyes half closed. He looked at me, looked at us, so looked at the sky, asked us, "What is this up there?" And me, and it's interesting, I'm not the expert, but I got one information, and that gave me the feeling of being the expert. I said, like, Jan, that's a thunderstorm. It's far away. Don't mind. It's not dangerous. Luckily, he had the experience. It took him 20 minutes to prepare the whole boat. He just put us in rain suits. He just taught me. He tied me with the rope on the boat. I was there. My job was to sit and do nothing. And I could literally do nothing. I was completely surrendering to nature and to these four guys who had sailing experience because I could do nothing. After this 20 minutes, there was a storm. For those of you who are on the sea, it was 11 Beaufort. So the wind powers, like they're measured in Beaufort, and there's 0, which is no wind, and 12, which is a hurricane. So we were in the middle of an almost hurricane. When we arrived, they told us in Mallorca it has just crashed houses and ripped trees out of the ground. And we were in the middle of the ocean, 10 hours ahead of Sardinia. And there was water, there was rain. It was me in the middle of the boat, flashes. I've never seen a flash hitting the water just next to us. It's so loud that you just heard this beep for a long time. Flashes on the boat, the skippers, and they always screamed like, "Don't touch metal," because he was afraid when the flash hits the boat. Don't touch metal. Where I was sitting, there was actually only metal. I was like, so I'm not, I cannot touch. It was really, I thought, and probably it was a near-death experience because I saw myself from the outside. And I realized that in my core, there was the mind getting crazy, completely crazy. Like, you're gonna die and water and what do you do? And then there was the self observing myself sitting there and saying, it happens. What happens? So it's just, you cannot change. I couldn't not do nothing, which basically at that time was a big handicap, showed was my key to self-awareness because I could not do anything. Then after 20, 30 minutes, it stopped. Temperatures dropped from 38 to 8. I was freezing, shaking on my whole body. And I just remember looking at my skipper and asking him, okay, are we done? And he said, no, that was the first half. The second half is going to hit harder and it's going to be longer. So this time I knew what's going to happen and just didn't have any chance to escape. We went through the storm. We survived. Luckily, nothing happened to the boat. And we reflected on it. I can tell you that was my rebirth. That was the moment of truth.
Oh, I
The
can
moment
understand.
of we then had to sail when the storm was over, suddenly the clouds disappeared. And guess what? The sun just came up. Like like always. And that's probably the biggest learning. The sun is coming up again. It is, if you might be in the deepest crisis of your life, the sun is rising again. It's coming up. Just trust it. And don't be afraid. Or be afraid and accept that. And that's what I meant before. It's just like, all will be good. And then we arrived at the harbor, and I just realized how it must have felt as Christopher Columbus reaching the shore after weeks of being at the sea. And we cried some time, and then,
Yeah.
wow. Then I called my father and my then partner. And yeah, the other side. I was on the other side then.
Wow. But I'm curious because you said this was like a rebirth, right? So, so the new you, who's that?
Actually, it's not a new you, because I came to the point not to believe in birth and death anymore. It's just a journey. We're just uncovering, we're taking off layers and layers and layers. And then when you just take off another layer, you see the next things that are coming up. So basically, the version that came out of it was the version that realized that everything is there and that can trust myself, trust my gut. I trusted my skipper, I trusted Jan, and I'm grateful that he took me on the trip. I trusted the people on the boat. I basically surrendered. It's still hard to surrender. And remember when we went to the harbor and we looked at each other and we said that was the experience of our lives. And I don't want to have it again. I never want to have it again. And does the universe follow what you wish for? Of course not, because it's going to happen again in this or the other way. And for me, it's basically more trusting my instincts, trusting my intuition, trusting that inner voice that keeps telling you in silence, completely calm, go left, go right. And sometimes doing things differently. I don't do everything my intuition tells me because I'm a human. But that's probably the point. Also, take the adventures when they come. Take the opportunities when they come. They might lead to painful experiences again. And your mind is going to tell you don't do or do it, but what happens? And there are other life situations where I struggled and where I'm still struggling and where I still don't know what is right or wrong. It's just like I'm still here and I'm still, and even more so, being able to enjoy my life.
So, have you been on a boat since?
No, no. Yeah, I have been on a boat, but not on this kind of trip. Whereas I think I would do it again. It's just like occasions. So if there's somebody out there, and this is actually one of my next things in my freelance job now, that I want to bring people on a boat. Just whoever has a boat, let me know. Let's create an experience, and not it's not about creating this kind of experience. I think already stepping on a boat, literally and in the sense of the word, and just moving away from the shore, from your known shore, that's already something. And that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm doing in my daily life now. That's taking people on the boat, whatever, but leaving the shores, building trust, finding alignment, and setting direction. And that's about it. That's probably what I got out of this trip. It's all about clarity. And if you don't have clarity, then accept it and just go.
Yeah, it seems like it has given you a lot, this trip on the boat, and also different perspective as well on a lot of things. Besides the resilience and the courage and building up strength and seeing things in a different perspective, which is amazing. Well, thank you, Sebastian. Is there anything that you would want to mention that hasn't been mentioned so far and include in the podcast?
I think I mentioned it partly. Just use the greatest gift of all, that we have people around, and talk to them. Let's talk. From we met in one of my LinkedIn conversations. Meet people. Just reach out to people you know, or reach out to people you don't know, and just listen to their stories. Even though there doesn't need to be life crisis or deep changing experience, but connect to each other. We're here. And I think we are in a time right now where there's a lot of anxiety around, and where there's a lot of insecurity. Life is always insecure. Just imagine, we are so small and there's so many things out there. But right now it feels like something wants to be born. It's loud and it's hard and it's tough, and talk to other people, and don't read the news. Sorry, that's very simple and straightforward. It's like, of course, if you want, read the news. But I stopped reading the news. I stopped reading, having these news tickers on my phone that keep pushing me with this catastrophic events every second. Just step out of it, because these events going to happen anyway, and you cannot change it. And it just makes something with your mind. And whenever you feel overwhelmed, reach out to people. Just, you always have somebody, and if it's somebody sitting next to you in a train, that's one thing.
I'm glad that we did, because see what came out of it.
Yes, see, right. One of the brilliant shining examples why you should. Grateful for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, grateful as well. So thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you for sharing your story and all your lessons. It seems really colorful and varied and very transformative. So thank you for all your wisdom shared with us. Thank you for being with us in the Life's Lessons Lounge. Remember, every story has its wisdom. Join us next time for more insights and inspiration. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing your own story.